military are drawn to rewarding but often low-paying jobs as first responders. As a matter of fact, 75% of Thin Line recipients are veterans. Thin Line Support is a nonprofit veteran and fraternal organization created to give assistance to people working as first responders who find themselves in crisis or disaster. Donations are taken in from whether it's personal hygiene products to large-scale appliances and household furnishings to be given to the first responders facing the crisis. Like anyone else, a first responder can be affected by a fire, a natural disaster, medical trauma, or floods. And they would lose such critical items as wheelchairs, walkers, or shower chairs. Meal trains are activated to carry food to the family to ease the load on the spouse. In the event of a funeral, snacks are placed for the family in the funeral home during the visitation. And since February of 2017, Thin Line Support went from a grassroots organization and an idea to a 501(c) organization. This brought growth in numbers, increase in donations, and expanse in size. Thin Line does so many things, but one program that I think is truly special is one they call Hugs from Heroes. Thin Line collects stuffed animals to place in first response vehicles to pass on to children in a crisis for them to cover. Many times as a child faces a crisis situation like that, they will remember less of the trauma of the accident or the fire or the loss of a home. However, they will remember the uniform that handed them that stuffed animal to whisper their fears to. Here's an interesting statistic. 60% of those children will someday themselves fill the boots of retired or fallen first responders. Thin Line Support now is not just limited to Madison County, Alabama. In the past years, trailers have been loaded to carry supplies to the floods in Louisiana twice. Then again to areas in Texas affected by Hurricane Harvey. Last Thanksgiving in Tennessee, the Knoxville area chapter carried 700 fully packed Thanksgiving dinners to the firefighters battling the wildfires. The face of Thin Line locally is its founders, Mark and Kathy Baker. If there's one line you consistently hear about these two, is Kathy and Mark just always seem to go above and beyond to do for other people. And as hard as they work, and as tough as they are, Mark and Kathy are the two biggest softies with the two biggest hearts I know. And it doesn't take too much to hear Kathy say many times, y'all are going to make me cry. Well, Kathy and Mark, y'all make us cry with your passionate, selfless dedication to your cause, and especially to our veterans in need. I'm happy to announce our 2017 Veterans Group of the Year, Thin Line Support. And accepting on behalf of Thin Line Support is Debbie Odell and Pam Engel. Being part of the coalition the last few years has let me meet and work alongside most of the veterans groups and see so many members. I'm always amazed at the selfless dedication by everyone I see and meet at every event. So when it comes to singling out one person as Veteran of the Year, we always have an incredible list of candidates from which to choose. The winners the past year certainly speak to that proud history. And yet this year, one person overwhelmingly was nominated as our Veteran of the Year. Here's just a little bit about our veteran. He's a proud Korean War veteran. He joined the Army in November of 1949, and after basic training reported to Aberdeen, Maryland, and was then stationed in Korea, where he spent his 18th birthday on the Manchurian border. Happy birthday. He returned home and left the Army in October of 1951. But he wasn't done, he was just getting started. He moved to Huntsville with his wife Margie in 1953 and raised a family of pretty impressive people in their own right. And he's lived here ever since. He's the oldest active member of the Patriot Guard Riders. He still rides his motorcycle to honor fallen service members, and he still stands in the flag lines. Now, after a full life, you would think he might want to slow down a little bit, put his feet up. You know, kind of like the young whippersnappers have their turn things, take over, do more of the heavy lifting, I mean, literally. And take it easy, just kind of armchair quarterback it. With this man, it's just the opposite. He doubled down. He is literally everywhere at every veteran's event. I've never seen anything like it. He's there at the beginning of an event, helping set up. At the end of the event, and you all know this so well, after a long day, 10, 12 plus hours, if you look around the room, even though we're tired, he's still there, and he's still going strong. At his age, he works harder than half the people his age. And I'm not just saying that, and I don't mean to refer to his age as a liability or some kind of excuse. If you ever want to feel sorry for yourself about how hard you work, just look around the room. He's certainly an inspiration to me and a bit of a mirror. You simply cannot be tired compared to how hard he works. He doesn't just show up at events. He works, and he works hard. And he also has a really good time doing it. You'll usually find him laughing, smiling, telling stories with everyone in the room. Oh, and maybe sneaking a few extra cookies in between all his hard work, much to his one daughter's chagrin. Now, if all that wasn't enough, he also volunteers at the Space and Rocket Center at least 10 hours a week mentoring children. I'm not joking. I thought there were 24 hours in a day. This must have 40. I could go on and on about this incredible veteran, but I think now most of you have probably figured it out. I'll leave you with one last story. At his recent 85th birthday celebration party, I asked him what was the secret to such a long, happy, healthy, productive life. Without hesitation, he answered, work hard at what you love to do, and surround yourself with people you love. And then without missing a beat, he added, and surround yourself with a lot of pretty women. It is my honor to present our 2017 Veteran of the Year Award to Billy Pop Neal.
Get it, Pop!
And I don't care why I'm that good these days, I'll tell you that. Pop is a force of nature. Little Aniceto Bagley was born in 1926 in the town of Carles on the Philippine Islands. When Aniceto was 2 years old, an American couple adopted him and brought him to the United States. However, in 1931, the family returned to the Philippines and happened to be there when the U.S. became involved in World War II in December 1941. When the Philippine Army was demobilized in 1946, Aniceto joined the Filipino Scouts, a component of the U.S. Army whose members had gained legendary status during the early days of the American occupation of the Philippines, and through their heroic exploits during the initial battles of World War II, the Japanese invasion of the Philippines. As an enlisted man in the Scouts, Aniceto rose through the ranks to eventually become a first sergeant and a battalion sergeant major. By the time his enlistment in the Scouts was up, the Philippines had become an independent nation and the Philippine Scouts had been disbanded. Aniceto was able to immigrate to the United States and immediately enlisted into the regular U.S. Army. As a non-commissioned officer in the regular Army, he served as the NCOIC of a personnel office and served as a radar crew chief. In 1956, he obtained a direct appointment as a warrant officer in the Army Reserves with an immediate call to active duty. He served with the Corporal and Sergeant Ballistic Missile Systems with brief assignments with the Nike, Ajax, and Hercules Air Defense Missile Systems. Aniceto went on to retire from the U.S. Army in 1976 with the rank of Chief Warrant Officer 4. At Redstone Arsenal, he served at OMNCS, that's the Ordnance Missile and Munitions Center and School. I went to that school, obviously. MICOM, the Missile Research and Development Laboratory, and the MICOM Maintenance Director. Upon retirement from the service in 1976, Aniceto settled here in Huntsville. He retired completely in 1992 and devoted his efforts to nonprofit enterprises that included the Disabled American Veterans, the Military Officers Association of America, AARP, and the Philippine American Association of Alabama Incorporated. In 2007, he was elected National Counselor of the Philippine Scouts Heritage Society, an organization formed to perpetuate the memory of the Filipino Scouts. He's also an active member of the American Legion, the VFW, a life member of the Association of the United States Army, AUSA, and the National Defense Industrial Association, and the U.S. Army Warrant Officers Association. 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., Speaker of the House Paul Ryan bestowed the Congressional Gold Medal on Aniceto Bagley and his fellow Filipino Scouts for their contributions to the American cause. The Congressional Gold Medal, which is bestowed by the United States Congress, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is bestowed by the President of the United States, are the highest civilian awards in the United States. Aniceto calls Huntsville, Alabama his home, where he lived with his wife, Trudy, who's now deceased. They have 3 grown children, 4 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandson. Ladies and gentlemen, Aniceto Bagley is with us here today. Lieutenant Aniceto with an authorized replica of the Congressional Gold Medal are General Gus Perna, the Commanding General of the Army Material Command, Dr. Joe Fitzgerald, the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army, and Gary Myers, President of the Redstone Arsenal Chapter of the U.S. Army Warrant Officers Association. The actual medal is placed in the Smithsonian and is not available to the individuals. The Warrant Officer Association purchased a replica, and they're presenting that to him now. On your screen are just a few of the other people who have been presented the Congressional Gold Medal for their contribution to the United States of America. These include General George Washington, all the way to modern era people that you may recognize. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Chief Warrant Officer 4, Aniceto Bagley. Today we remember the end of the First World War, the Great War, or the war to end all wars as we know it, World War I. It has been 100 years since the U.S. entered the Great War, on April 6, 1917, when the U.S. declared war on Germany. Of course, no World War I veterans are alive today, as the last American World War I veteran was Mr. Frank Buckles, who passed away in February of 2011. He was 110 years old. The years after World War I have been referred to as the Age of Anxiety. As horrible as World War I was, the study of modern psychiatry intensified, and long before PTSD was diagnosed and understood, we used terms like soldier's melancholy, battle fatigue, shell shock, soldier's heart, nervous and mental shock, and more formally, operational exhaustion. Cases of shell shock could be interpreted as either a physical or psychological injury, or simply cowardice and a lack of moral fiber. World War II changed the term to combat stress reaction. I would like to tell you that with all that we learned from World War I, we quickly understood the effects of sustained combat operations and applied those lessons to our soldiers who fought in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and in the modern era. But I would be lying. In 1980, we found a new term to describe this phenomenon, PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder often leads to depression, social anxiety, and even suicide, but it doesn't have to. Trying to fix this problem in our community is Ms. Kylie Henry, founder of A Smile for Troops, and organizer of 22 Won't Do. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Kylie Henry.
Thank you, Max. As always, you give a wonderful introduction. Pardon my traveling voice, guys. I woke up sick this morning. My son back there was all prepared to get up and take my place, but I think I got it. I'm speaking to you today to bring awareness to the 22 veterans a day, on average, that commit suicide across the United States. We have a wonderful veteran community, and we pride ourselves on being a motivated community based on our veterans. So how do so many people that clearly need help not seek it? In a study just released, the average suicide rate for Alabama is estimated at 29 people a day. The average across the country is 22 a day. I want to start by mentioning this app. That app. That is a very useful one that Huntsville Hospital has developed. It is something that I recommend everyone download. There are things on there to help you, to help others if needed. Or if you need help, it can help you too. Asking for help does not make you weak. It means that you realize that your life is worth living. There are so many resources available, so why are these soldiers not getting help? Something that I have learned by doing 22 Won't Do is that the people who truly need help are afraid to ask for it. Why are they afraid? Admitting there is a problem is the hardest thing to do. When you are overwhelmed at work, buried beneath piles and piles of work, do you ask for help? Or do you suck it up and do you deal with it? Because that's your job. That is what you're supposed to do. Do you call your supervisor and tell them that you need help? That you just don't know how you're going to get through it? No, you don't do that. But why don't you? Because you don't want to be weak to your boss or your commander or that one person that you fear is going to judge you. It is all the same, but on a much larger scale. These soldiers go on and serve their country very well prepared to defend us in the face of the enemy. However, no one trains them to come home and deal with the things that they went through over there. They come back and they are thrown right back into life. The one thing that I am told over and over again when I talk to soldiers that have returned and are dealing with PTSD is that they don't go talk to people at the VA because they are young kids and they've never been what I've been through. How can they possibly help me? The suck it up mentality is something that we are doing with these soldiers, and they are not aware of how to do that. Surely they come back and they put up a front around their family and friends to get through their day. But when the night comes and the fear takes over, they are no longer that strong and brave soldier fighting a war overseas. They are home fighting a war in their head. That is why I do 22 Won't Do. For those of you unfamiliar, it is a 22 push-up event to show our support to veterans. I decided to do this event after seeing it through social media. All the Facebook people and Hollywood stars and singers and musicians doing 22 push-ups to show their support and to raise awareness for veteran suicide. I got to thinking that we could do this here on an epic scale. So like always, I called my friend John Perry, wherever he is out there. And he supports me. He said, sounds like a great idea, Kylie. I think we should do that. So we did this, and we were going to do it on a very large scale. We wanted to have 2,200 people down at the memorial doing this, to put Huntsville out there and show what we were doing for our veterans. By the end of the following week, we had a date. We had it all ready to go. We had 225 people, 1 dog, and a pig doing push-ups for us that day. The first year we did this program, the sun had barely come up, and a gentleman with his service dog were walking around. He was looking at the veterans wall over near the east side where the Iraq and Afghanistan wall is. He started talking to me without even looking at me. And he said, I have some buddies on that wall. What you guys are doing here is wonderful. People will come here not to ask for help, but because they think they belong here. I explained to him that it was my honor to do something to encourage our veterans to ask for help. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were very watery, and he said, so you're the organizer? Yeah, I'm the organizer. I didn't know where this was going. I nodded my head, and the next thing I know, I'm embraced in a bear hug that would give my daddy a run for his money. The man was crying on my shoulder and thanking me for doing the event. He said, you never truly understand how much hope something like this gives people. Someone giving attention to a horrible statistic is what Huntsville does. Huntsville tries to make things right. He said he was watching the news the night before, and then he felt like he needed to be here. He wasn't sure why, but he was there. 22 Won't Do is the push-up challenge that we do to bring awareness to the 22 veterans a day, on average, that commit suicide. Of all the veterans events that I have attended in my life, this was the most emotional day I have ever spent in Huntsville. The tears and the stories of loss and survival flowed all morning. Then the moment came where everyone dropped to the ground, leaned against the memorial, and we counted off the number 22. Even now, I get chills thinking about it. Join us next year on September the 22nd. It's during Suicide Awareness Month. And we'll be doing it again. This will be our 3rd year. We need some sponsors. I already hit up the kids' table back there. I challenge you right now, though. If you have a social media account, pick up your phone right now. I know you're not supposed to have it out. It's a fancy dinner, but you got it beside you, so go ahead and get it out. Type in a new message that says 22 Won't Do. Call the hotline, which should be up there now. So when that pops up, all right, there you go. Look at it. Okay. So type that in, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do, because it does make a difference. It does make a difference to somebody. Someone that needs it or knows someone that needs it is going to post that, share it. It will be seen. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes tonight to talk to you about this epidemic. I appreciate each and every one of you in the audience tonight that sacrificed for our country. If you need help, ask for it. If you know someone that is struggling or someone that has returned, call them, take them for coffee. You don't know what they're facing. They'll say they're fine, they'll look fine. Call your friends. God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie. I know she wasn't feeling well tonight, but I told her she'd come in, No, in remembrance of the 22 veterans who commit suicide each day, and a reminder that each of us could be a light to guide someone in trouble back home. The AFC band Liftoff with vocalist Sergeant Amy Mahoney will sing a special presentation of Coldplay's song, Fix You.
When you try your best but don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired you just can't sleep, stuck in reverse, in reverse. The lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will fix you. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. Would everyone please rise and join me in singing this refrain? Lights will guide you home. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will fix you. One more time, please. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will fix you.
Good job, Sergeant Mahoney. We thought it'd be a little different if we put some human faces. I like it. At this time, we're going to get into what you came here for, which is the Madison County Military Heritage Commission. when little MCs want to grow up, they want to grow up and be Tom Kennemer. And we're lucky enough to have Tom Kennemer here tonight. So at this time, I would like to invite the legend that is Mr. Tom Kennemer to the stage. We're just glad to have you here, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I proceed with the induction, I'd like to introduce the President of the Madison County Military Heritage Commission, Mr. Bob Marshall. Bob, step up, please.
Distinguished guests and friends, good evening. I wish that you could see what I see from this vantage point. This is, without a doubt, the finest view in all of Madison County. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is quite an event. I want to thank, of course, AUSA and Max Bennett for orchestrating what is a magnificent evening and exceptional, even by the standard that you've set in years past. And happy birthday, Marines. Hurrah! For the rest of you, what that means is 242 years of continuous twisted steel and sex appeal. Brought to you by the United States Marine Corps. Hooah! I speak many languages. Are there any football fans in the house? Roll Tide? Steve Lowe? Roll Tide? War Eagle? Any cowbells? Go Tiger! Easy. I've got a story for you. On December 31st this year, it will be 50 years since the 1967 National Football League Championship game was played at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now imagine this, in 1967, over 30 million people would tune in to watch that game. More than 2 years after football had become the most televised and popular sport in the nation, this game featured a matchup that all of America hoped for in the NFL championship. Because of the adverse conditions under which the game was played, the rivalry between the two teams, and the game's dramatic climax, it has been immortalized as the Ice Bowl and is still considered one of the greatest games in NFL history. The victor would play in Super Bowl II. The Dallas Cowboys traveled north to meet the Western champion Green Bay Packers, two-time defending league champions. The game pitted two future Hall of Fame coaches against each other, the Cowboys' Tom Landry and the Packers' Vince Lombardi. Landry was the best defensive mind of his era. Lombardi was the best offensive coach in his. From a personality standpoint, they were the antithesis of each other. Lombardi was a vociferously demanding coach who would respond with a greatest elation to success and tremendous frustration at the slightest setback. Tom Landry, of course, was stoic and calm in even the most tense situations. The Packers were on a quest to achieve what had never been done before, 3 consecutive world championships. To the game, Green Bay brought its renowned Lombardi sweep. The Cowboys brought a defensive scheme, the flex, which was specifically designed by Landry to stop the Lombardi sweep. And of course, the Cowboys brought their vaunted doomsday defense, a nickname given by a Dallas journalist because it had been so successful at making goal line stands. Remember that. The Packers, who had for years avoided late season home games because of the cold winters, would host a game that would mark the coldest New Year's Eve in the history of Green Bay and the coldest title game in the history of the NFL. Now listen to this. At the start of the game, the temperature at Lambeau Field was about 15 degrees below zero, with an average wind chill around 48 degrees below zero. The cold was so brutal, as referee Norm Schachter blew his metal whistle to signal the start of play, it froze to his lips. When he attempted to remove the whistle, the skin ripped off and his lips began to bleed. Instead of forming a scab, the blood simply froze. Seeing his demise, the game official wisely put away their whistles after the opening kickoff and used voice commands to end plays and officiate. It was an unbelievable game despite the cold. After establishing a 14-0 lead in the first quarter, the Packers were shut down by the Cowboys' defense, which also scored Dallas' first touchdown. By the beginning of the fourth quarter, the Cowboys had scored 17 unanswered points. In their last offensive drive, trailing 14-17, the Packers took possession at their own 32-yard line with 4 minutes and 50 seconds left. Sunset was approaching, and the wind chill was an incredible 70 degrees below zero. Bart Starr led his team down the field on a grinding but successful drive. Now fast forward to the Cowboys' 1-yard line. First down, Packers. Twice they attempted to run the ball, but both times the running back slipped on the icy field before taking the handoff and was tackled near the 1-yard line each time. The Packers called their last timeout. On 3rd and goal, at the Dallas 2-foot line, and 16 seconds remaining, Starr went to the sidelines to confer with Lombardi. Starr asked his always reliable All-Pro right guard Jerry Kramer whether he could get enough traction on the icy turf for a wedge play, and Kramer responded with an unequivocal yes. Starr told Lombardi, "Coach, the linemen can get their footing for the wedge, but the backs are slipping. I'm right there. I can just shuffle my feet and lunge in." Lombardi told Starr, "Run it, and let's get the hell out of here." On the sidelines, Lombardi was asked by one of the Packers which play Starr would call, to which Lombardi replied, "Damned if I know." Starr returned to the huddle and called Brown right, 31 wedge, a play intended for the fullback. He did not tell his teammates he was keeping the ball. Kramer led the block on left defensive tackle Jethro Pugh, allowing Starr to lunge across the goal line to take a 20-17 lead with 13 seconds on the clock. The Packers had won the game. With an audience of over 30 million on TV and 51,000 in Lambeau Field, Jerry Kramer, who was the reason the play was called and why it worked, simply got to his feet, trotted off the field, and took his place on the bench. To him, he simply did his job, completed the blocking assignment he volunteered for, and sat down. Can you imagine? Now, what's my point? Jerry Kramer, 50 years ago, perfectly illustrated what I call the Hall of Heroes syndrome. Without exception, every inductee tells us, I'm no hero. I only did my job. This humble commitment to fulfilling one's assignment and sitting down, to moving forward in the most desperate and trying of circumstances, to get someone else across the goal line, marks each and every one of them. Character, be it good or bad, is mainly practiced and perfected in obscurity, when maybe one or no one is looking. In the kitchen, in the backyard, in the weight room, on the ride in the car to and from school, making someone else's sandwich, making your own bed, putting your weights back, taking out someone else's trash. The reality is, men and women, such as tonight's inductees, were heroes before we knew they were heroes. They were giving their lives for others, but only 5 or 10 minutes at a time, for years. They'd been taught by positive role models. Parents, grandparents, coaches, teachers, pastors, drill instructors. Others for whom they held great respect. And character, good or bad, is often made public in times of chaos or hardship or distress, when no one can help but look, be it for a moment or days or sometime even years. Today, the reality is many professional football players, people who command the attention of our youth and our press, kneel when they should be standing and stand when they should be kneeling. It seems every other tackle or touchdown is an opportunity for self-adulation. How things have changed in a short 50 years. True courage and stories of selfless sacrifice, but still inspire, ennoble, and embolden the rest of us. Which begs a question. What kinds of sons and daughters are we raising, you and I? When they grow to adulthood, will they understand what it means to simply do their job, do it well, and with little fanfare? Will they be resilient in the face of withering odds because their cause is right and just? Will they have a firm reliance on the God of all grace, who is able to feed many with only a few fish and loaves and turn certain death into certain life? Will they volunteer to carry someone else's burden or lay down their own life? Mark it well. If we ever fail to raise a generation willing to leave the comforts of home in order to defend it, to know the kind of love for others that extinguishes intense fear, to move with purpose to the sound of the gunfire, to defend the defenseless. If we fail in this, we shall cease to be a free people. Now, today someone might think this is too much to expect. Tell them to listen carefully to the stories you're about to hear. A few concluding remarks. Tonight is unique for the Hall of Heroes in that we are inducting 2 new members posthumously. They're represented by the women they loved and who loved them. One a mother and one a wife. We are most fortunate to have them in our presence tonight, for they bring into sharp focus the kindness and care that always lives in the shadow cast by the military members we recognize for valor. But tonight, they are no longer in the shadows. Heroes are not heroes alone, ever. And most would not have survived the blows inflicted by the enemy without the constant attention and concern of loved ones. Julie and Claire, thank you for your service and many sacrifices. You too have contributed to our common liberty. And finally, this year painfully taught me that unlike heroes in movies, real heroes don't live forever. In 2017, we lost some real heroes. Leo Thorsness, Bob Wilkie, Bill Badu, Don Powers. All men of renown in our community. I wish real heroes lived forever, or at least longer than me. Then I wouldn't have to say goodbye, and they could tell their own stories. But I've learned that it doesn't work that way. We must be sure to thank them while we can, whenever we can, and not presume upon tomorrow. To do any less would be a shame to us and an injury to them. Let us resolve to be shamelessly, relentlessly grateful to those who have or who are protecting us with their very own lives. Mr. Kennemer, I'm going ashore. You have the con. Present the inductees, sir.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to introduce several others who will join Bob and I here on stage to present the awards to this year's Hall of Heroes inductees. If you don't mind, please hold your applause until they're all in place. So we'll call them up in the order. They will be in the receiving line following Bob Marshall. Included in our ceremony will be the presentation of Purple Heart certificates to 3 of our inductees with the Hall of Heroes ceremony. Each sustained battle wounds while serving during the Vietnam War. Making the presentation will be the commander of the local chapter of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, Mr. Leonard Robinson. Leonard is a Purple Heart recipient himself. He's also a Military Heritage Board member. Leonard, will you join us on stage, please? Next, we would like to have 5th District Congressman Mr. Mo Brooks. Congressman, would you join us, please, sir? General Gus Purnam, Commanding General of the Army Materiel Command on Redstone. General, would you join us, sir? Mr. Joe Fitzgerald, Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army for Northern Alabama. Please join us. Huntsville Mayor Tommy Battle. Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dale Strong, Chairman of the Madison County Commission. Would you join us, sir? Chairman of the Madison City Council, Tommy Overcash. Would you join us, sir? Redstone AUSA Chapter President Sam Torrey. Worth mentioning once again, Sam is the president of the world's best AUSA chapter for 2017. Oh. Yeah. And Beverly Lowe, president of the Veterans and Fraternal Organization. Organizations Coalition. Let's give these folks a round of applause. It is indeed a privilege each year to have the honor to present to you those who exemplify what patriotism and devotion to duty truly means to our country. I will now read the names and the deeds of those who will be inducted tonight into the Madison County Military Heritage Hall of Heroes, and those to be enrolled in the Purple Heart Honor Roll. Michael Goodrich was a young second lieutenant serving in Germany in 1987 when he demonstrated courage and sacrifice for his fellow man that would be recognized as worthy of the Soldier's Medal, U.S. Army's highest award for non-combat heroism. Lieutenant Goodrich had graduated a year earlier from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and was on his first assignment with the Air Defense Battalion near Linheim. He was driving home from the base on August 21st, 1987, when he came upon the scene of a car accident. He noticed a man trying to exit an upside-down van which was engulfed in flames. Disregarding his own safety, Lieutenant Goodrich immediately pulled the burning victim from the van and extinguished the flames by wrapping him with his battle dress uniform shirt. Administering the proper first aid technique, he then treated the victim for shock until relieved by medical personnel. Second Lieutenant Goodrich's outstanding performance in an emergency situation was in keeping with the finest traditions of military service, reflecting great credit on himself and the United States Army. Tragically, 13 years later, while again serving in Germany, then Major Goodrich, his wife Jennifer, and their two children, Michael and Kyle, all perished in a horrific cable car accident while vacationing in Austria. Ironically, on Veterans Day, the year 2000. Tonight, accepting her son's induction into the Madison County Military Hall of Heroes, it is with great pleasure I present to you Mrs. Julie Goodrich. Michael was a 1982 graduate of Butler High here in Huntsville. Jennifer, his wife for 14 years, was also from Huntsville, a graduate of Grissom High. Also joining Julie tonight is her daughter, Dr. Deborah Shepard is with us from Naples, Florida. She is also joining her mother here tonight. Donald Harp served 26 years in the U.S. Army for his gallantry in action while serving in Vietnam. He is the recipient of the Silver Star, our nation's third highest award for valor on the battlefield. Don, an Oklahoma native, was drafted in 1968 but decided to go ahead and enlist to become a door gunner on a helicopter. But that all changed after he qualified for a warrant officer flight school. After completing his flight training and becoming a helicopter pilot, Don got his first taste of Vietnam. He was assigned to Headquarters Company, 1st Cav Air Mobile. On 10 July 1969, Warrant Officer Hart was on a reconnaissance mission scouting an area of recent ground-to-air fire when his aircraft, an OH-6A helicopter, came under fire from a 50 caliber machine gun. Moments later, Warrant Officer Hart lost contact with his lead helicopter, which had been shot down by hostile fire. Given the location of the downed aircraft, he immediately proceeded to the area to attempt a rescue of survivors. Under heavy machine gun fire, Warrant Officer Hart safely landed next to the crash site and his crew was able to get the pilot of the downed aircraft on board. As he was leaving the area, still under machine gun fire, the downed helicopter exploded and began to burn. Had he hesitated before landing, he and his crew and the other pilot would have been in the area of the explosion. Warrant Officer Harp's action is in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflects great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Donald B. Harp. Don is also the recipient of an Air Medal with Valor for his action in Vietnam. Don also received a Purple Heart for wounds he received following a mortar attack at a landing zone near the Cambodian border. He was hit in the leg with shrapnel from an explosion near his helicopter. Several other crew members were also injured. Unfortunately, his crew chief was killed in action during the mortar attack. Don and his wife Linda have been married 46 years, and they have 2 children and 3 grandchildren, all girls. Don says they keep him busy. He and Linda have lived in the Huntsville area since 2000. He's employed by the LME Corporation. Paul Kyle was born in Tacoma, Washington, but grew up in Southern California. He was drafted in 1967, but after basic training, was selected for a flight school, and upon graduation, he became a warrant officer and a helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army. He served 30 years in the Army, including 2 tours in Vietnam, retiring as a lieutenant colonel in 1997. For his service to our country in Vietnam, Paul Kyle was awarded the Silver Star, 2 awards of the Distinguished Flying Cross, and 2 Air Medals with Valor. His citation for the Silver Star reads as follows. On March 6, 1969, while serving as an aircraft commander of a UH-IH helicopter with the 227th Aviation Battalion Assault Helicopters Air Mobile, Warrant Officer Kyle distinguished himself by exceptionally valorous action. During a resupply mission, a small friendly force had been surrounded by the enemy, and things quickly escalated as the greatly outnumbered friendly forces were pinned down by enemy automatic weapons, small arms, and heavy machine gun fire. As darkness approached, 5 helicopters had been damaged attempting to put more troops into the area, and the ground commander had made an urgent request for an evacuation helicopter for his seriously wounded men. Warrant Officer Kyle immediately volunteered to undertake the mission, and as he approached the area, the enemy unleashed a heavy volume of fire on his descending helicopter. The barrage of enemy rounds, many piercing his aircraft, continued after he landed, but Warrant Officer Kyle stayed on the ground until all the seriously wounded were on board. Once the wounded were secure, he was able to lift the helicopter off the ground, but could not sustain flight due to damage to his aircraft. With great skill, Warrant Officer Kyle executed a forced landing in a secure area, thus saving the lives of everyone on board. Warrant Officer Kyle's gallant action is in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflects great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Paul Kyle. Paul and his wife Virginia have been married 47 years. They have 3 children. In 2013, Paul became an ordained deacon at Good Shepherd Catholic Church here in town. While Kyle is a Purple Heart recipient, while on a mission over Vietnam, his helicopter came under attack. There was an explosion and he received what he called a face full of metal and plastic shrapnel. The doctors were concerned for a while that he would lose an eye, but he recovered to fly another day of many years of other days. Paul still finds the time, on occasion, to race motorcycles and do a little mountain climbing. He is definitely in good standing. He's got some pull somewhere, huh? Thank you, Paul. Bernard Andrew Parr passed away earlier this year, served 20 years as a U.S. Army helicopter pilot, and is the recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross for his heroism while serving in the Republic of Vietnam. Bernie, as he liked to be called, grew up in Baltimore. According to those I've talked to, he could fix anything. Enlisted in the Army in 1966, qualified for flight school, and because he had that knack, that desire to repair things, became an aviation maintenance officer and test pilot. Story goes that upon his arrival in Vietnam, Bernie flew combat missions for a week or two before the company commander found out he was supposed to be assigned to maintenance. But he loved to fly, and going on a mission was just more fun. Chief Warrant Officer Parr distinguished himself by exceptionally valorous action while serving as an aircraft maintenance technician with the 162nd Assault Helicopter Company after his base came under a deadly rocket and mortar attack in March of 1968. Following the enemy attack, only 6 troop-carrying helicopters were able to fly. Despite poor weather, low ceiling, and traffic patterns limited by friendly artillery fire, Chief Warrant Officer Parr proceeded to repair and test fly the aircraft. On 5 separate occasions, enemy mortar rounds impacted dangerously close to his aircraft. Due to his superb performance, the 162nd Assault Company was able to carry out its assigned mission. Chief Warrant Officer Parr's actions were in keeping with the highest military traditions and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, accepting Bernie's induction into the Hall of Heroes is his wife of 50 years, Claire Parr. Bernie served 2 tours in Vietnam. He's also the recipient of an Air Medal with Valor for his heroic action during aerial combat. Bernie and Claire have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. Bernie loved to fish, even started his own custom rod building business. Flying was always in his blood. He was one of the founding members of the North Alabama chapter of the Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association. Thank you, Claire. It was 47 years in the making, but last month, in the ceremony in the White House, President Trump awarded Gary Michael Rose the Congressional Medal of Honor, our military's highest award for valor on the battlefield. Mike was born in Watertown, New York, grew up in Southern California, joined the Army in 1967, became a medic in Special Forces, served 20 years in the Army in Special Forces and Field Artillery. Tonight, Mike will become only the 5th Medal of Honor recipient to be inducted into the Madison County Hall of Heroes. During Operation Tailwind in Laos in September of 1970, then Sergeant Rose distinguished himself by acts of gallantry while serving with the 5th Special Forces Group Airborne 1st Special Forces. Sergeant Rose's company was engaged by a well-armed, numerically superior hostile force, deep in enemy-controlled territory, that continually fired off rockets and mortar rounds while also spraying the area with small arms and machine gun fire that wounded many in his company. At the outset of the battle, Sergeant Rose, braving the hail of bullets, sprinted 50 meters to a wounded soldier's side. He used his own body to protect the casualty from further injury while treating his wounds. After stabilizing the soldier's wounds, Sergeant Rose, while firing his own weapon at the enemy, carried the soldier back to protected cover. As the enemy escalated the attack, Sergeant Rose continually exposed himself to intense fire as he fearlessly moved from casualty to casualty to provide life-saving aid. During the battle, a rocket landed near Sergeant Rose, knocking him off his feet, injuring his head, hand, and foot. Ignoring his wounds, got to his feet and continued to render aid to the other injured soldiers. Over the next 2 days, Sergeant Rose continued to expose himself to enemy fire in order to treat the wounded, estimated to be half of the company. During the company's eventual helicopter extraction, the enemy launched a full-scale offensive. After loading wounded personnel on the first set of helicopters, Sergeant Rose returned to the outer perimeter under enemy fire, carrying friendly casualties and moving the wounded to a more secure area until they could be evacuated. As the final helicopter was loaded, the enemy began to overrun the company, and the helicopter's Marine door gunner was shot in the neck. Sergeant Rose immediately administered critical medical treatment, saving the Marine's life. The helicopter carrying Sergeant Rose crashed several hundred meters from the extraction point, further injuring everyone on board. Despite his own wounds, Sergeant Rose continued to pull and carry unconscious and wounded personnel from the burning wreckage to provide aid and comfort until another extraction helicopter arrived. Sergeant Rose's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty were critical to saving numerous lives over the 4-day period of the battle. His actions are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, the 1st Special Forces, and the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure I present to you Medal of Honor recipient Gary Michael Rose. Mike is also the recipient of the Braun Star Medal with Valor for his heroic action during the Vietnam War. Mike and his wife Margaret have been married 46 years. They have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. Now Mike can say he spent a year in Vietnam and received 3 Purple Hearts, but he was never injured in Vietnam. He points out that he received 1 Purple Heart in Cambodia and 2 in Laos. So for him at least, Vietnam was a safer place. Mike is involved in his community. He is associated with the American Legion, the Vietnam Veterans Association, the Knights of Columbus, and he's a pretty good handyman, I understand. He's always fixing things around his neighborhood, and he and his wife, Margaret, of course, love to spend time with their grandkids. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Michael Rose. Sullivan served 27 years in field artillery in the U.S. Army. He's also a paratrooper. Before retiring as a colonel in 2013, Mark had served 5 tours in Iraq. For his service to our country in Operation Iraqi Freedom, Mark is the recipient of the Braun Star Medal with Valor. In March of April of 2003, then Major Sullivan distinguished himself while serving as the Brigade Fire Support Officer for the 3rd Brigade Combat Team. His tactical expertise and leadership abilities allowed the battalion commander to lead the battalion in the destruction of the enemy in 8 major battles of the war. On several occasions, he continued to coordinate and deliver indirect fires and close air support for friendly maneuver forces while under direct and indirect fire from the enemy. Throughout the 26 days of sustained combat operations, Major Sullivan's courage and devotion to duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, the Rock Support Battalion, the 3rd Infantry Division Mechanized, Rock of the Marne, and the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark S. Sullivan. Since retirement, Mark has worked with the U.S. Security Assistance Command based at Redstone. He and his wife Leslie have 6 children, with 3 presently in college. And Mark wanted me to mention that if any of you have any odd jobs that pays well, he might be in. Thank you, Mark. We're going to take a few more pictures, and then our inductees will be presented with roses. You know how these photographers are, they like to get the best pictures, so we're going to have to give them plenty of time here. They always do a great job. Glad you, sir. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for the 2017 inductees. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As the roses coming, I'm sure they made it on time. What happened to the florist? We'll straighten that out. You'll get some roses. You may be seated. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I'd like to remind everyone of the Medal of Honor unveiling at the Hall of Heroes displays in the Madison County Courthouse lobby on Wednesday, November 29th. This includes Mike Rose's Medal of Honor and his biography along those of other county Medal of Honor recipients. That event will be from 4 to 5 p.m. That's November 29th. The public, of course, is invited. At this time, we will present certificates to 5 other veterans will be added to the Madison County Purple Heart Honor Roll. We will call them out individually. First will be Mike Boyd. U.S. Army Colonel retired Michael F. Boyd is a distinguished military graduate from the Mississippi State University ROTC program. He was commissioned in the regular Army as a second lieutenant of armor in 1966. During his first tour in Vietnam with the 3rd Squadron 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, Lieutenant Boyd received 2 Purple Hearts while engaged in combat operations against the Viet Cong in 1967. Second Lieutenant Boyd received the first Purple Heart when he was wounded by a booby trap during a search and clear mission to Viet Cong tunnels and caves. A contaminated bamboo stake had penetrated his right foot. He returned to his unit after 3 weeks in recovery. A few months later, Second Lieutenant Boyd was wounded in both legs and his left arm following an enemy attack on his tracked vehicle by rocket-propelled grenades. He was hospitalized for 3 months. Mike Boyd had 2 tours in Vietnam. In 1969, following completion of flight school, he returned to fly Cobra attack helicopters for the 101st Airborne. Colonel Boyd retired from active service in 1993 as the Chief of Staff of MICOM and continued supporting Army aviation requirements for 21 years as a program manager with CAS Incorporated here in Huntsville. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Boyd. Ben Matthews III was born here in Huntsville. After high school, Ben attended Vanderbilt University, where he received a mechanical engineering degree. In January of 1944, at the age of 18, Ben began his active duty with the U.S. Army. He was trained as a heavy machine gunner. He arrived in the European theater in October of 44, where he was assigned to the 100th Infantry Division. 73 years ago, this past Tuesday, he received a head wound while serving in France and received a Purple Heart. Back in Huntsville, Ben and his wife raised their family of 2 daughters and 2 sons, 7 grandchildren, and 11 great-grandchildren. Ben returned to Vanderbilt and received a law degree in 1971. He passed away December 31st, 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, accepting the Purple Heart certificate for the family is Ben's grandson, Benjamin Houston Matthews. Specialist 5 Richard Weiss entered the U.S. Army in his hometown of Collinsville, Illinois, on September 30th, 1965, just before his 20th birthday. Specialist 5 Weiss was trained as a combat engineer and upon arrival in Vietnam was assigned to C Company, 39th Engineer Battalion, Combat of the Americal Division. His duties included defensive mine sweeping, mine clearing, and road and bridge repair operations along Highway 1. On November 8, 1967, while sweeping for mines in an abandoned minefield, he sustained injuries from a mine blast that resulted in the amputation of his right foot, for which he received the Purple Heart. His injuries landed him in Valley Forge Hospital from November 1967 until March of 1968. He was retired from the Army in May of 1968. He and his wife Joanne have been married 47 years and have 3 daughters and 6 grandchildren. Rich retired in 2003 after 37 and a half years with various government agencies and 9 years at Camper Corporation working with Black Hawk engines. Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Rice. Huntsville native William Stewart enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps in 1948 and was trained in small arms infantry. On August 13, 1950, he was wounded in Korea, resulting in the loss of his left eye. After receiving his Purple Heart, he served as a proof technician for small arms until his separation from the Corps in June of 1951. He and his wife Betty were married in 1952. They had 3 children, Donna, Philip, and Jimmy Lynn, and 1 granddaughter, Jennifer. Don worked many years as a machinist for Braun Engineering until his retirement. He was preceded in death by his wife, and he passed away June 15, 2006. Ladies and gentlemen, accepting the Purple Heart certificate for the family is Donna Stewart Martin. Donna? Thank you, Don. Warren Stanley Schmidt is a World War II veteran and Purple Heart recipient. Then Staff Sergeant Schmidt served from 1943 until 1946 with the U.S. Army Air Corps 15th Air Force 456 Bomber Group as a B-24 nose gunner. He flew missions throughout the European theater. On one of those bombing missions, he was wounded by anti-aircraft fire and was awarded the Purple Heart for his wounds. He and his wife Edith moved to Huntsville in 1958, were married for 55 years until her death in 1991. They have 2 sons, Warren Jr. and David, 2 grandchildren, and 1 great-granddaughter and a great-grandchild on the way. Warren worked with Teledyne Brown Engineering for 40 years in various capacities. He remains very active in his church and in September participated in a trip to London, England with the Forever Young Senior Veterans Organization along with 10 other World War II veterans. Ladies and gentlemen, Warren Schmidt. A gunner and a B-24. Okay, we need to get some pictures here, and then we will conclude this part of the program. Max will be with you in a moment. All through? Boy, these are fast photographers, aren't they? Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our Hall of Heroes induction ceremony, as well as the enrollment of our Purple Heart recipients. We will now turn the program back over to our Master of Ceremonies, Max Bennett. Max?
Bet you all feeling pretty good about coming here tonight, huh? Guys, tell you what, that never gets old for me. Love it, love it. I hate you. I ain't talking. So a very special thanks tonight to Prevailing Winds for being with us tonight, and also to the AMC Band's Liftoff, and especially vocalist Sergeant Amy Mahoney. You're going to hear her in just a moment. I want to remind you the next AUSA event is Christmas in Dixie. It's Saturday, December 16th at 7 p.m. here at the BBC, but over at the Mark C. Smith Concert Hall. You'll hear Christmas music, Dixie music, and rock and roll. As is a tradition, we enjoy doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, if you or a family member or loved one ever served in the armed forces, or if you just feel like it, you can please stand as your service song is played, and then please remain standing and be recognized during the service song. So, the band. The Coast Guard.
We place our trust in thee. Through surf and storm and howling gale, I shall ever be. Send over us from thine, our fame and glory due. To fight, to save, or fight, to die. My Coast Guard, we are for you. Off we go.
U.S. Air Force.
To the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, soon to meet our thunder. And boys, give the gun. Down we dive, spouting the flame from under. Off with one hell of a roar. We live and breathe for the flying. Ain't nothing can stop the USA
out of here. If anyone was on the committee to put this together, all the Veterans Week, where's my team at? Would you please stand up? Guys, these guys were amazing. Where are you at? Barbie Ball from Team Redstone. Stephanie from Lockheed Martin. Justin up in the booth from Lockheed Martin. Megan Goley from Team Redstone. Team Redstone, I don't know how you get the quality of people that you do, but I want to thank you a lot. Please look for my thank you page in the brochure there. I really appreciate everybody who helped me out this year to put this together. Did you all have a good time tonight? I thought it was amazing. Thank you all for coming out. Please be careful going home and